All right. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Jim Zabricki, and I'm a learning solution specialist with Macmillan Learning. I've also taught both online and face-to-face classes at community college and university level. Today, I want to talk to you about LaunchPad and how it can help as you're transitioning your course online. But before we get started, I kind of want to share a metaphor that was shared with me recently that I found really helpful and makes a whole lot more sense of the situation. Okay. So I don't know if you're like me, but I am a terrible flyer. I know flying is safe. I know the aerodynamics behind flying, and I usually do a Google check just to see where the turbulence is wherever I'm flying to. But because I get so much anxiety every time I fly, because I hate turbulence no matter what, no matter how many times I hear the phrase, it's like the bumps on the road. It doesn't reassure me because every time I drive, the chances of a sinkhole is going to open up and my car falls into it are going to be slim to none. Okay. But this is true. I have noticed that my anxiety goes down a lot when the pilot comes on to the intercom in advance and says, hey, it's going to be a little bit bumpy, but we're going to climb out of this and find some smoother air. I'm sure the pilot hates the turbulence as much as I do, but the pilot saying that makes me feel like there was like an expectation set and that we're all in this together and that I can prepare myself mentally for that road ahead. That's kind of how I feel about this daunting task that you and I have with our students as we move our face-to-face classes to a fully functional online experience. There's no way around it being different. And the pathway to the end of the quarter or the semester may be bumpy, but if the proper expectations are set, we will get through it. And you can actually think of Macmillan Learning as your flight crew. We're here to help, and we're here for your safety. Now, unfortunately, because this webinar is just a short half-hour call, think of it as like a puddle jumper. We won't be serving refreshments on this flight, but that's all on you guys. So all that being said, here is today's flight plan. So this is the plan of what we're going to be talking about on today's call. So what I'd like to do is show you basic LaunchPad functionality, and think of that as like our takeoff. So I'm going to give you the tools to show you what's inside LaunchPad. And then when we get to cruising altitude, what I want to do is show you 2 out-of-the-box assignments that are ready to go that you can assign today to your students. And those are called learning curves and summative quizzes. And then as we prepare for our initial descent, what I want to talk about is how do you make a quiz or an exam inside LaunchPad? And then as we prepare for landing, there's some things to check out or think about. And then finally, when we touch down, we'll talk about where to find additional help, and then it'll be time for you guys to ask me and ask the panel questions. Okay, so that being said, let's get started. So I'm going to exit out, and let's go inside a LaunchPad course. Now, I'm already inside a LaunchPad course, but let's go to the very first thing that you're going to see when you log into your course. You're going to get to the screen that says My Courses, and it's time to create a course. Okay, so in order to create a course, you're just going to click on this button that says Create Course. And it's going to ask to confirm which product you're going to be using or which textbook you're going to be using. In this case, I just chose one of our life sciences texts at random as an example. So we're going to use Schuster's Biology for a Changing World today. Okay. The next question is, do you wish to copy an existing course? In this case, I'm going to say no. Let's create it completely from scratch. When we get to this screen, the Create Course screen, now it's time to give your course a title and include as much information here as possible. Now, there is a best practice here. If we can, if it's possible, we want to try to name it with a course number in the title. So let's say we call this Bio 102. Okay. And then I want to say, usually I want to put the semester in the title as well, spring 2020. And then what I try to do is also add my name to this title. So that way it's a lot easier for students to search for this. I know you're repeating some of the information down below when you fill this out, But when students are searching for your course for registration, it's going to be a lot easier for them to see this information inside the course title. So let me type all this out really quickly. Let's call it section 1, and we're good to go. Now, down here where it says student LMS ID, right now we're going to do not prompt students to provide their campus LMS ID. We're going to hit create. And there it is. There is our course. Now, one thing we need to do before we do anything else is to activate the course. What activate the course does is makes your course live, so that way your students can find your course and register. And so by hitting the activate button, which again, over here, you've got the warning triangle with a button that says activate. Click on that link. You're going to click on activate, but double check first to make sure that everything here is correct. And when you activate, you're going to be given the URL for your individual course. This is what you're going to give to students. Now, down below, you do have an email here that you can copy and paste into your email, your email program, and send this to your students. This is going to give them access. It's going to give them that link to get into LaunchPad. Okay, so let's go inside the course and check things out. Okay, all right, so now we're in the heart of LaunchPad. There's going to be a series of buttons over here on the left-hand side. This is going to control your experience inside LaunchPad. So there's a lot of functionality here, but let's focus just bare bones on what you need to survive right now. Right now, we're on the home button, okay? And this is going to be the heart of the course. This is where your students are going to do the majority of their work, okay? So right off the top, if you guys see this banner at the top of the screen, it says you have no assignments due in the next 7 days. What happens is that your assignments, once you start assigning things, will be populating at the top of the screen. And I'll show you how that works in a little bit. The next button down is the ebook. This gives students the ability to see the ebook as it appears, as it was printed. So if you want students to read the ebook, this is the way that students would do that. The third button down below is Gradebook. We'll play around a little bit more with Gradebook once we assign something. But a more important thing I do want to show you is this fifth button down from the left, this Resources button. If you're looking for any resource for your title really quickly, this is the best place to check. So if I click on this Resources button, okay, it's going to give me a pop-up that appears on the right-hand side of the page. And I have a couple ways that I can search: content by type, content by chapter, content I've created, and removed content. So since we just started out the course, let's click content by type. And this shows you everything that's in the textbook inside LaunchPad that's available for the student, as well as everything that's available for the instructor. So if you're looking for the test bank files in a Word document, or you're looking for image slides or lecture slides, it's all right here. So this is usually the easiest way to find anything that you're looking for in the text very quickly. Okay, so those are the things, those are the basic functionality that you need to know in order to use LaunchPad. Okay, so that being said, we're now at cruising altitude. So let's check out a sample chapter, but first let's go back to the home screen. Let's check out a sample chapter. Let's go down to chapter 6, dietary energy and cellular respiration. Now, each learning curve product, each title is going to have a little bit different, it's going to be organized a little bit differently than other titles. So just keep this in mind as you're going through your individual course. But every learning curve, every LaunchPad course will have 2 assignments common for each product. You will have a learning curve activity, and then you're also going to have, at the bottom, you're going to have either a chapter quiz. It could be called a summative quiz. It could also be called a homework assignment. So you are guaranteed that you will have at least 2 activities within each LaunchPad chapter for every course. You're going to have a learning curve, and you're going to have some sort of summative quiz. Now, a little bit of information about these two. We're going to dig into both of these in a little bit more detail, but learning curve is meant to be a formative assessment, and it's our adaptive system. The summative quiz is a more traditional quiz that's built from our test bank. So it's going to use questions that would be akin to what's on a midterm. Okay, so like I said, we're going to dig into a learning curve as well as that summative quiz today. And these are 2 out-of-the-box assignments that are ready to go live. So let's take a look at learning curve. So you and your students may find learning curve particularly helpful right now for a few reasons. Learning curve is a formative quizzing activity where the questions are tagged to different parts of the chapter, and students need to work their way through to hit the target activity score. Think of it like completing the level in a video game, but you're just reading the actual chapter in a book. So let's first go to preview as a student. So what I'm going to do is click on this button on the upper right-hand corner that says preview as a student. Okay, I'm going to click on the circle that says begin activity. So that way we get to see what the question looks like from the student perspective. You can see that as I try to answer this question, this particular question is worth 15 points if I answer it correctly on the first try. But if I answer it incorrectly, so I answered it incorrectly and I get a little bit of feedback, but look at what happened to the question value. So I just lost the value of this question because I just got it wrong. Now, this is a true and false question, but if we go on and try to take a look at a multiple choice question, this one's going to be a little bit better. Here we go with a question value set at 15 points. If I try to answer this question incorrectly, let's go with nucleic acids this time. I get the question incorrect, and like I said, there's a little bit of feedback, but look at what happened to that question value. It went from 15 points down to 5 points. So I can still earn 5 points for getting this correct on the second try. And if I try to answer it, if I get it wrong the second try, I can get 2 points for answering correct on the third try. I never lose points. I just can earn less points towards my target score. In this case, it's out of 600 points. So it's always a formative step forward, albeit a small step. Sometimes it's a small step. Now, that being said, if I don't know the answer right off the bat, the main strategy the system will use is to nudge the student to actually read the ebook page. So what I'm doing is clicking on the ebook to see that, yeah, it's going to bring up that page. And usually all you have to do is scroll down and find the answer. And sometimes, almost 9 times out of 10, learning curve is going to drop you off on the section of the page where this is being discussed. Okay, so students are not penalized for reading the ebook. And in fact, you may have seen the published research that shows students' retention is up to 3 times higher when they are reading with a question in mind. So after finding the answer, they can go back and answer the question for the full amount of points. Now, students like learning curve because as long as they don't give up, they can work their way through it. And the system is adaptive with questions tagged by different sections and difficulty levels. So students cannot rely on knowledge from only one part of the chapter to carry them through the entire assessment. The system will eventually start pushing them along so that way they are exposed to the entire chapter. Now, what I'm going to do is go back to the study plan. Now, another reason that students like learning curve is that it gives them a personalized study plan based on how they did. It's going to direct them to the sections that they were weaker in and show them any additional resources. Let me open one of these folders. It's going to show them any additional resources or videos or animations that may be available in those areas that they need more help. So those are the reasons why learning curve tends to be very, very popular. So what I'm going to do now is leave the student side and let's go back to the instructor side. Okay, so we're back on the instructor side now. There's a few reasons, especially now, that you might find assigning learning curve to be helpful. First, students who complete learning curve activities tend to show up to the lecture better prepared to engage. whether that's a face-to-face lecture or even in this case, virtually, or even delivered in an asynchronous manner. Another helpful thing is that learning curve will help you take the temperature of the classroom, even though you don't have your normal classroom. Okay, so what I'm going to do is populate this course with some sample students. I'm going to click on this button that says show sample students. So that way you can get an idea of how the material is going to be, how the reporting is going to look like to you. Okay, so you can actually see on the right-hand side under the topic performance details, you can actually see how your class is doing as an aggregate. Or if I go to the left-hand side and click on an individual student like Ada Lovelace over here, you can actually see their individual work yourself. Knowing how they did broken down by section will be very helpful when students are emailing you or if you end up holding virtual office hours. So all that being said, learning curve is going to be your most thorough and easiest to assign out of the box activity inside LaunchPad. Again, this is meant to be a formative assessment. This is getting students to build a foundation. By reading the chapter, this is a way to help them build that foundation to understand the main points in that chapter. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is exit out of learning curve. Let's go check out that summative quiz. So not only do you have that learning curve, but you also have a summative quiz for each chapter. So let's check this quiz out. Okay, now these are curated assignments that have been derived primarily from the test bank. Now, because of the situation that we're all in, what I would strongly recommend, especially if this is your first time using LaunchPad, I would recommend to use the chapter summative quiz either out of the box or use this assignment as a scaffold to construct your homework assignment or quiz, okay? And the way you would use this as a scaffold is that if we go up to the edit button up here in the upper right-hand corner, okay, we can actually go find some questions. So on the upper left-hand side, you're gonna have a series of tabs here. If you click on search questions, you can actually search the test bank for actual questions. So let's say we want to search chapter 6. Let's see what chapter 6 has. So it's telling us that we're seeing 25 questions out of 163 questions total. So the way this works is that if we go down to a certain question, we click on that question, and it actually gives us a preview of what that question looks like. Now, if this is an appropriate question that you want to add to your quiz or your homework assignment, you would click on this button over here on the right-hand side, on the lower right-hand corner that says Add Question. By clicking on that, you get this green bar that says Question Added to Assessment. And now, if we go over here to the upper left-hand corner to Review and Modify, you can see that number went up from 25, now it's at 26. So that question we just added is now at the bottom of our assignment. Now, one other cool thing that you could do, let's say that these 3 questions, and I'm going to click on the check mark boxes next to those lines. Those 3 questions, let's say that those are good questions, but I want to make sure that students, I want to make this a little bit more random. So that way students are going to get different questions. What I could actually do is create a pool of questions. So let's say I want to create a pool of questions using these 3. So what I'm going to do is go to this blue link that says Add Check To. I'm going to click on this, and you have the ability to either add it to the quiz directly or create a new question pool. And so if I click on Add to New Pool, I can actually give this question pool a title. Let's call this Pool 1. And then you can actually tell the system, I want to test students on, let's say, 1 question out of this pool. So I'm going to click on Create Question Pool. And so now it says questions have been added to pool, but the Review and Modify number went from 26, now it's 27. So let's see what's going on with the Review and Modify area. So this is the actual assignment, okay? And if I scroll all the way down to the bottom of the assignment, there are the questions that I've added. So here's question 26, which was the first question that I added. And then question 27 is that pool that we've created. And so you can actually open up this pool and see exactly which questions are inside that pool. Now, what's really cool at this screen is that you have absolute control on the questions, meaning that you can click the edit button next to each question and you can change the wording of the question. So if you like a particular question but wish you had the ability to edit, you actually do. So you can edit these questions. Okay. So that's how you would add a question. I'm going to hit cancel really quick. So that's how you would change the add a question to your assignment. Finally, once you get the questions into your assignment that you're happy with, we go over to the settings tab. And here in the settings tab, this is where you're going to choose the settings that you want for this particular assignment. So for instance, you can set the number of attempts. Okay, so you can make this unlimited, or you could specify how many attempts students would have on this quiz. And then you can also specify how students would be scored. Is it going to be the first attempt, the last attempt, or the highest, or the lowest? Okay, so we tend to set it usually either on 1, 2, or limited. So it all depends on what your course wants to do. You can also specify a passcode that students have to have in order to enter the assignment. This could be particularly useful if you're creating a quiz or an exam inside LaunchPad. You can also set a time limit that's going to start the moment that students enter that assignment. You can also choose question delivery. So do you want to see all the questions at once, or do you want to see the questions one at a time? You can also allow students to save and continue. And then you can also scramble the question order or randomize the answer order in a question. And then you can finally choose how do students see the questions and the solutions. So you can choose to see them after every attempt, after the due date has passed, or never. And then finally down below, you have visibility. So you can choose when you want this to be made available. You can make it available right now, or you can hide this from students until a certain date. So what I'm going to do is make this visible right now and then keep all the settings that we have. Finally, the last thing we do to make the assignment go live to students is to go to assign due date. This is where we're going to choose the date and time that this assignment is going to be due. So let's make it due Friday night at 11:59 p.m. Now, what's kind of cool is that you can actually allow late submissions for a grace period. So let's say students are in the system, they started the assignment late, you can actually give them a grace period to finish up the assignment. Okay, and then you can also schedule an email reminder for students to complete the assignment a couple days before the assignment is due. Okay, and then you would finally specify the amount of points that you want this assignment worth, and then also specify how students are going to be graded. Is it going to be full credit upon completion or use a score earned? So I'm just going to go use score earned. Finally, I'm going to hit the assign button. Okay, and now it says item assignment saved. So now if I go back to the home page, okay, you'll notice that the chapter 6 folder has gone from the bottom between where it was between chapters 5 and 7. Now the chapter 6 folder is moved to the top of the screen. And so it's telling students, hey, you've got an assignment due on March 27th. So students have to open this folder up, and then they see that the chapter 6 quiz is due on March 27th, and it's worth 10 points. Okay. So one other thing that I do want to point out after we made this assignment live, let's say you do have a student who needs an additional extension, or you have to give, let's say you make this a timed assignment and they need double time. So let's say you have to make an accommodation. The easiest way to do that is to go back to the left-hand side of the screen. And this time we're going to take a look at the calendar. So if I click on the calendar, you get to see the entire class's calendar and when things are due. If I need to delay a quiz or a homework assignment, let's say instead of making this due on Friday, I want to make this due on Monday, March 30th. The way I would do that is it literally pick up, click on that assignment, and drag it over to Monday, March 30th. So that's if you're going to do a blanket extension for everybody. Now, if I want to give an accommodation to certain students, in the upper right-hand corner, you have this drop-down menu that says Schedule 4. You can actually click on this and click on Add Individual. And so what that would do is that you would start searching your class roster for a student, and then add that student. You can actually make those changes on that individual student's calendar. So that's a really easy way to make an extension or an offset for students. Okay, so that being said, we've just looked at learning curve, which is our formative assessment. We've looked at our chapter summative assessment. And so now we're starting to make our initial descent. So the third pass that we're going to make inside LaunchPad, what if you have to make an exam or a quiz from scratch? So what's really nice about this is that you're going to follow pretty much the same protocol that we just did to get that chapter 6 quiz, that summative quiz live. So there's just a little change that you've got to do. All right, so what I'm going to do is right between the assigned and the unassigned area, you're going to have these two buttons on the right-hand side. You're going to have Add New and Add from Resources. So what I'm going to do is click Add New. And so this is where if I want to create a new folder or a unit for students, I can do that. What I'm going to do is click on this unit, this button that says Quiz. So I want to create a quiz. Okay. Now the first screen is going to make me give this a special title. So let's call this Exam 3. And if you want to give it a subtitle, you can. But once you do that, what I'm going to do is click Save. Now I'm ready to go, and I can start going into search questions and do exactly what I just did for that quiz, for that summative quiz, by looking for questions that are inside the test bank. And then I can add those directly to my assignment. So everything that you've just done for making a summative quiz or making that homework assignment go live, it's going to be the same protocol to make an exam from scratch. The other thing I do want to point out at this point is that if you go to the settings area in the upper left-hand corner, you definitely want to make sure that you're choosing the right number of attempts. You definitely want to pay attention to the screen. And try to set up your exam or quiz in a way that makes sense for you and your students. Okay, so that's really nice. Making an exam from scratch inside LaunchPad is pretty much following the same protocol that you just did for that summative quiz. Now, there is one other thing to pay attention to. Your department or your college or your university may be mandating that you have to use a lockdown browser like Respondus in order to deliver some sort of summative assessment. Okay, if you are required to use a lockdown browser, you can't use LaunchPad for your exams, but we do have a workaround for you. You could actually access the Macmillan Learning Test Bank from the catalog page, and what you would do is create, it's an online test bank or an online test generator. You could actually create your exam there using the test bank questions that we've got in LaunchPad, but you would do this in this other test bank area. You would export your exam as a zip file, and then you would upload that into your campus LMS software, okay? So keep in mind that if you are required to use a lockdown browser, we do have a workaround for you, and that's something that your rep can help you with. All right. So that being said, now it's time for last call. So it's time to put up our trays and clean up the cabin before we land. So a couple little housekeeping things to keep in mind. You do have the grade book. So let's check that out really quickly. This is going to be the repository of all your assignments that you're going to request or you're going to require for students. So you're going to have students on the left-hand side, and then you're going to have a column for each assignment going forward. If you need to export your grades into Excel, over here, you're going to have a tab on the upper left-hand corner. You're going to have a button that says Export Scores. This is allowing you to export your grades you can actually choose which grades you want to export into Excel, and you would be able to export that as a CSV file. So yes, absolutely, you can export your grades out of LaunchPad into Excel. The other thing I would also really, really strongly recommend is, again, you've got that resources button on the left-hand side of the screen. Check out the resources button, because every course, every LaunchPad is going to have different resources that are specific for this textbook. Like, for instance, the textbook I'm looking at right now has materials from Scientific American that are embedded inside your LaunchPad course. So these are things that you can definitely check out as you're going forward. Finally, the other things that we want to definitely talk about is that if you'd like to have a one-on-one session with someone from our customer experience team, they can actually help you go through the resources that are available to you and your students. So please feel free to sign up for additional training with our customer experience team. And not only do you have the customer experience team, but you've also got your local rep and your specialist. And you've got the customer support team, and you've got help pages. And those help pages have a whole lot of information on them. So after this, and now it's time for us to land. So after today's session, what's going to happen is that you are going to receive a copy of this recording. So if you have any questions, you can always go back to this recording. You're also going to have a link to contact your representative if you still need to set up access to LaunchPad. You also have a link to sign up for a personalized session with a discipline specialist, and then also additional support materials and a link to our support knowledge base. So that being said, do you have any questions or any concerns about anything that we've gone over this morning?
Everyone is on mute. This is Scott Guile. I'm with Macmillan as well. Please type any questions you may have into chat, and we will address them. I think we're good, Jim. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And seriously, if there's anything that Macmillan Learning can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, folks.